Dumela. Le kae? Re teng. Nna ka lebitso ke Lerato wa ha Seohatse. I'm based here at the Writing Center as a senior writing consultant. So I'll be facilitating this conversation on citizen scholarship. So scholarship, or rather let's not be that complicated. So education can be used for empowerment. But we also know that people like me, it can also be used for purposes of disempowerment. It can be used to liberate, but it can also be used to dominate. So my idea of a citizen scholar is a person who uses education, who uses knowledge for purposes of empowerment. But that's me. I have among us here people who are going to hopefully help us elucidate that concept, but not just abstractly, but very much from the concept of a citizen scholar, very much from the work that they are doing. So these are the people who are on the interface of academia and society. People who've used knowledge, who've been in this space, academic space, formal learning spaces, and who've moved into the world, who've moved into specific sectors of society to make certain contributions. So we have here my namesake, Lerato, who is with the Writing Center. So she's my colleague here, but she has done some wonderful work in various spaces in society generally. And I don't want to misrepresent her, but she's also with the Center for Deaf Studies, right? You're still with it. Yeah, but she has also done wonderful work working with primary school learners, promoting the culture of reading and writing. Someone who has also done similar work, Nelisiwe, she also used to work for the Wits Writing Center, and she's still very much linked involved with the Wits Writing Center. So yeah, she's also studying, as far as I know, but she's also promoting the culture of reading and writing, mostly amongst high school students, right?
So it's both. Luckily, we have a teacher from one of my primary schools who's also here. So
okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
Ma'am Rose.
Okay.
Been mentored by a lot of lovely teachers, like the one who's supporting today.
Yeah. So me and her talk a lot about the work that she does, and I suppose some of those conversations will come up during this interaction. I don't want to go into detail, but she'll also tell us more about herself. And we also have a newly minted doctor among us, Dr. Wacango. She's an educationist, but she has also forayed into the social media space, online space, exploring ways of spreading the word, advancing knowledge for the purpose of empowerment. Currently, she's very much using YouTube, ne? But she's also my colleague at the Writing Center. She's a writing consultant. If I've missed out anything else, please feel free to come in. And then we have Catherine Sofianos. So Catherine is with the Canon Collins Trust, and she's working there as a communication specialist. But personally, she's passionate about the use of writing and visual storytelling to influence social change. So I think we can all welcome them. Yeah. So thank you for being with us here. So before we go any further, if there's any detail about you that I might have left out and you want to share with us, important detail that I might have left out, and you think it's important that we hear about it, please.
It will come out organically, I suppose.
Yes. Yeah. So education, knowledge in particular, is a powerful resource. That's how I view it. And it's a resource that can be used, and for me, that should be used for purposes of social change, and for purposes of empowerment. But we also know that it can be very, very dangerous. So it can be used for purposes of control, and it has been used, And I talk of a black person, a person who share history with a certain people who have been at the receiving end of the type of, that's why we talk of Bantu education, right? The type of education that has been used for purposes of control and domination, for purposes of coloniality, But we have people who have taken initiative, and who are taking initiative on their own, right? To say we will use it for purposes of empowerment, right? We'll use it for purposes of social change. We'll use it to advance ethics. We'll use it to advance democratization. We'll use it to advance social justice, right? We'll use it to advance equality. And in spaces like this, when we think of, higher education, scholarship, mostly we talk of, research, how powerful research is and is important, right? Universities like Wits University, they're increasingly focusing on research. It's research, publication, publishing, obviously teaching. But seldom do we talk about, the kind of people who are out there in communities, drawing from the resource that, the knowledge resource for purposes of empowerment. And seldom do we get to appreciate those people. Seldom do we talk about it, So we don't talk about what I call citizen scholarship enough, We don't celebrate it, Often there are little rewards associated to that. The people who produce, for example, who go out and make a difference in society, or in various sectors of society, but also people whose scholarship is intentionally, people who produce the kind of scholarship that is intentionally meant to address social problems in society. People who produce the kind of scholarship that is intentionally meant to address certain specific social ills in society, right? And I think in this session, if we can have a moment there, and I think I'll involve you, you might, to a lesser or a greater extent, be involved drawing from, or doing scholarship yourself, or drawing from various scholarship to make contributions in your communities. How best do we do that? How best do we encourage that? How best do we support that? And is it making a difference? So before Kia Lololo, before Kia Hole, maybe Catherine, you might want to share with us about, the kind of work that you do, the support that you provide to citizen scholarship, and where do you think we are, specifically maybe in the country in terms of that? What is happening in that regard?
Well, the picture of what's happening in South Africa, I will try to answer. But so the Canon Collins Trust started in about 1981, and it was very much based in London and working closely with ANC and the PAC, and I think recognizing that change was coming to South Africa, so they had to support exiles and freedom fighters to prepare for that change, and so that's where scholarships came in to provide education for people who would go back to South Africa and then leave the country. And then with the transition, obviously that shifted, but not substantially shifted in terms of the goal of providing scholarships to support education that would have social justice outcomes. So that hasn't changed until today. And as I was saying to you earlier, it's if an academic scholar wants to do a degree with the view of impacting of a social justice outcome, then that, and we believe if they can show that they can achieve this vision that they have, then that is more important to us than what they're studying to an extent, and also their marks. Of course, academic performance is important, but it is not as important to us as a trust as social justice outcomes. And so the second thing that we do once the scholarship is then in place is then cultivate a community of support, solidarity, lifelong support, encourage collaboration, encourage just the support just across life to allow those scholars to then hold vision really throughout their lives, and then working across Southern Africa so that the focus is really not just on South Africa, but on developing an entire region, an open and just society in the whole region. So can I give the little Chris Hani thing? Because for me, Chris Hani is your classic scholar, activist, citizen scholar. So I've got a little quote, just because I've been thinking about him quite a lot recently and what it means to be a citizen scholar. So he says, my early Catholicism led to a fascination with Latin studies and English literature. These studies in these two courses were gobbled up by me, and I became an ardent lover of English, Latin, and Greek literature, both modern and classical. My studies of literature further strengthened my hatred of all forms of oppression and persecution and obscurantism. The action of tyrants, as portrayed in various literary works, also made me hate tyranny and institutionalized oppression. And then he goes on to have a life that is, I think, richly informed by his scholarship, but also richly productive in terms of his role in society as a political leader, as a whistleblower within the ANC. So, I mean, for me, that's the kind of person that we're trying to cultivate through our trust, our work in the trust. The picture of what's happening in South Africa, there's never enough funds to be able to support the many scholars who's applied to us for scholarship. So I'm quite hopeful about the vision of using of social justice outcomes through scholarship. And it's really something that one does in partnership with higher education institutions. You know, we can only help to this extent that we have funds, but it's something that we also see and encourage in academic institutions as well.
Okay, we'll come to you. So, yeah, I did allude that I've had conversations with you on the subject, and I'll bring you in, Nelly, here. So Nelly is working with schools in Soweto mostly, right? So Nelly is very passionate about her work, you know. Yeah, so she goes out on her own, establish relationships, you know. She'd be coming here to the writing center to collect books, you know, but also to the education campus. I think, you know, people there, you know, asking books, you know, and then sharing with students, you know. I think there's a book club that you're part of in one of the schools, but she's also working with various schools, and also working with teachers. I can see the passion in her eyes when she tells me about the work that she does, but she can also help share about her struggles, you know. So it's an interesting mixture in her. There's so much passion about what she does, you know. She sees the need, you know. She comes through, you know. But what I sense is she feels like there's no movement, you know. And she's been doing it for several years, but, you know, she often feels discouraged because she feels like for people like her and others, they come into the space, you know, and they give their all to, you know, they give their all, but there seems to be no movement in what she does, you know. Not what she does, you know, what is happening in those spaces, right? So she's a person who studied here at Wits University. It's a very well-resourced space. And often she says, I don't feel like, you know, after all these years, you know, given the circumstances, the resources, you know, what is going on in the school, you know, I always feel like those kids are not ready for higher education, you know, and they're not being readied for higher education. And she often, you know, so there's that, you know. I can sometimes feel like she's getting despondent, you know. And a person like that can really easily get discouraged, you know. So the question I was going to ask you, Sophia, is, do you feel like the work that we've been doing, you know, providing support to citizen scholars, they're being effective in communities, you know, after all the studies, you know, and you talk about the network of solidarity and all that, you know. Is there a sense in which, you know, do you feel like they're being effective, you know? Nelly certainly does the work. I'm not sure about the support that she receives, you know. But often she's on the verge of, you know, of despondence.
I mean, I would definitely say that is why the value of being active in a community of scholar activists, of citizen scholars, is so important. Because I think the more you collaborate, the more you share that kind of spiritual tiredness, the stronger you'll be. I don't disagree with you. Just recently, one of our alumni, who's really just 35 years old, he died. He passed away. And I had been thinking, just because there've been so many deaths of young men this year, and we spoke about Eusebius Makaiser, and I couldn't help thinking when Eusebius died, I wondered if he was tired. And the same thing happened with Klein Smith, because he fell ill, and because the spirit is so willing, and you are so committed to the work, you almost run yourself dry, and you don't pay any attention to yourself. There isn't self-care, there's not sufficient self-care, and then you quickly try to get better all the time. So with this particular guy, he was sick, it started with the flu, and thinking, oh, I'm better, let me go back to work, and let me put on theatre productions, and let me, go my utmost for people and give of myself, and then getting sick again, so it becomes pneumonia, and then getting better and getting sick again, it becomes TB, and then passing away. And just like 2 days before he died, there he was in the hospital marking homework.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought to myself, good Lord, because even with myself, I've ended up in hospital because you get burned out and you really risk losing your life. And is it worth it? And so often people get burned out because they are scholar activists. Chris Hani, you whistle blow and you take a punishment for that. You take punishment because your heart is so willing. So am I despondent? No. I am very aware that part of the cycle of the scholar activist or the citizen scholar has to be action, has to be study, but it also has to be rest, and it has to be community, friendship, and support. You have to have those things. And when those things are in place, yes, you can. I do feel hopeful when I see people doing those things and having those kind of support systems in place. And there are people who are doing work that I'm incredibly excited by. But there must be rest.
And then, so I'm very interested in seeing this kind of work thrive, and just now, in my interaction with you, you spoke about the concept of the network of solidarity. That you are, so you're interested in that, you're working with.
So definitely, because of scholar activism being a value, social justice is a value from the outset, it's much easier to build communities, but we have events where we bring people together. Pam was just at our event over the weekend when we bring our scholars from across Southern Africa together, and they meet each other, they share they share research interests, they share common vision. Very often they can be from across the kind of fields of study, and because they have this thing in common, they form interdisciplinary insights and forms of collaboration. We also have these very kind of industry-specific groups, like a peace-building group in Southern Africa, and then bringing people really even from the 80s to meet with them, and then you can really have conversations about what does it mean to be an African peace builder, what does it mean to represent your scholarship on a global setting. The moment you form those networks, you can then also network those networks south-south and globally. So there's all kinds of strengths and opportunities that come out from networks of solidarity.
Oh, thanks very much. Lerato, let me bring you in. You're teaching English in Korea. Okay, so Lerato is are you still doing that work? Not the English one, the work with primary school learners?
Not at the moment.
And why are you not doing it?
I was in Korea last year, but also because the model that we had aimed to build when we started this NGO, it's called Timbuktu in the Valley Learning Space. The model we had aimed to build was one that would continue without us. So it was important for us to, and I was a person who was an outsider of the community. I live nearby, but I was not in the community itself. And it was important to, I'll use the word that you used, empower people who are interested in this work to really be involved. And that's what we did. And now people from the community have just taken it and just run with it, There's more sponsorships of books, there's reading clubs. I mean, it was a multifaceted thing. I mean, when we started, we didn't even have a room. I was bringing, my childhood books to read with children who were curious around the neighborhood. A lot of them would be children of immigrants who didn't have papers. A lot of children in the community didn't go to school, And then I met 2 other people who, saw the same need, but they brought in their interests. And then we built this NGO really, And, I think that in whatever you build, it needs to be self-sustaining. It can't work just because you're there. And I think sometimes we forget about that when we build these, spaces really. So can you remind me of the question, please? I feel like I rambled a bit.
No, don't stress. In what ways do you think do you see the work that do you see? Okay, I mean, in writing center we talk of writing as thinking. You can suppose you can talk of writing as agency also. So the very activity of the intellectual work also, it's a work of agency, and I see it as, we are here, we are doing work, but it produces the kind of agency that gets us out there in the world, doing some of the work that we do in the world, right? So in your head, when you think about it, the link between the work that you do as an academic and the work that you do in communities, how do the two work for you? How do they support each other? Because the work that we do here, and people have criticized, academia as an ivory tower, right? As an elite space, right? And some people say, it's hopeless. There's no way that, we are just about ourselves and about our own personal advancement, and it's for our own gain. And maybe for some people it is that, right? But we're trying to think of ways in which, it is not just that, and it can be more than that. And some of us believe that it can be more than that, What has inspired you about, for example, the work that you do at the Writing Center, but also in sociology as a sociologist, to be out there in the world and do things?
I think one of the things that inspired me was working here at the Writing Center, and this and having this mindset that writing is thinking, and you spoke about agency as well, creating agency. So when we were working with the children in Lawrenceville next to Bertram's, one of the important things was that I know I was heading up the reading and writing program, and children would read, because a lot of children struggle with reading in South Africa, as we know, reading for understanding. So we'd read, and then I'd also ask them to write stories, and they'd write about their environments and all of that stuff, and they would be thinking, and these activities, and sometimes they would draw, because not everybody was at the same writing level. So sometimes I'd say, okay, fine, then draw what you want to talk about. And, that really helped children with their confidence, with their ability to express themselves. That sense of agency, that's important. We need that. We need children to know that, my voice is important. I can really make a difference out there. And, we saw children really transforming and becoming assertive. They were bold in, asserting their needs. their interests. I mean, we had different things in the space. Reading and writing was a core element, but we also had art, and we exposed them to different things like planting, environmental things. So, I mean, it was really getting children to decide their own, to decide their own trajectory in life with our support, really, and us just exposing them to these different things via partnerships. You spoke about solidarity. So we partnered up with, theaters and this and that. And, sometimes they'd sponsor lifts to go to a museum, or they'd, Wits would sponsor a project where the kids could do some coding. So, yeah, I mean, and the children also, I mean, initially it was, okay, so what do you guys have for us? But eventually they were like, okay, we want to do X, Y, Z. That's the kind of, things that children should be doing. Oh, we want to go and ride bicycles and enter a bicycle, riding competition. They are deciding for themselves. They really are hands-on in creating this future they imagine for themselves.
Thank you. Dr. Wacango, how's the YouTube project going?
Okay, how's the YouTube project going? So about 2 months ago, actually, exactly 8 weeks ago, I started, and my initial starting, I keep questioning myself, why did I start it? What was the point of it? There are many, many reasons, but one of the things that brought that's relevant to this is one of the things. Who is this book? Where's the book? Yeah. Okay, so what I decided that was going to be different from any other was that I was going to profile books written by by people in Africa specifically, but not necessarily. And so, for example, like this coming Sunday, I drop the videos every Sunday. So this coming Sunday, I'll be talking about English, and the fact that that I'm saying that getting people to realize that English, what you were talking about, education being for dominance and education being for empowerment, and how English has been used to beat people up, in a sense, quote unquote. And I'll profile some things. Unfortunately, like in the parliament, I don't know when it was, where one parliamentarian here in South Africa was telling another, speak like a black man. And so it's the more I envision what I want to be doing, is that I want to be getting out that kind of information where people are learning in a way that frees them from those kind of chains that keep us, held down. The fact that somebody will speak English in a certain way, and for somebody else to put them down. There's so many videos about African accents. I find those ones very demeaning. Or you find people think it's funny. It's not funny, because you're beating people with a language that doesn't even belong to anybody. English does not belong to anybody. So in a sense, the more I think about the channel, the more I think about I'm challenged. As much as I'm making them as simple as possible, I'm not being too simplistic. I'm also thinking about, am I actually providing information in a way that is slightly different than what is normally there, but also bringing out things that will create a sense of, I don't call it empowerment, but something different. So, for example, this time, I'll be using this book, The Colorful Necklace of My Mother Tongue. So it's written by actually somebody I know, and she's a Maasai, and talking about the Maasai language. And from it, I talk about how we need to become owners of our own English. So my English is different from yours, but doesn't make mine better than yours or yours better than mine. So that kind of perspective is what I'm hoping I continue to bring. So it's unfolding, and I'll see how it goes. The other part of YouTube is that it's meant to be a space for entrepreneurship, so that's why I'm promoting it by sending out those what are they called, bookmarks, and hoping that I'll find more and more books to profile, and hopefully see how it goes from there. So it's still in an experimental new phase, but it's been exciting, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it progresses.
Yeah, I mean the issue of language, of English, and it's quite an interesting one. So I'll keep on bringing you in. So at some point says I'm encountering resistance. Some of the teachers at school says I'm promoting English. So Nelly says I'm all about reading and writing, but so but in school, so you have people Zulu, Tswana, and all that, and the sort of, you want to talk about that, then you're being accused of promoting English.
Remember that I came and you gave me a nice counseling session, because like Catherine said, the despondency, it does get to you, and I'm happy that I've been provided with great mentors who come in at strategic points, and you served as a very good mentor, just to counsel me and to ground me, to help me make sense of things, because there are times where I get too emotional, because the language thing, obviously I came from a Model C school, but now most of my work and projects have been in no fee paying schools in Soweto. So already there's that thing where you're doing a reading project. Obviously I'll fall back to English because I never did isiZulu or Afrikaans was the second language I did, at high school. So for me it's just so easier just to communicate very fast in English, and with reading and books, I mean it's always easier for me to do things in English. But along the way, I saw that I lost my identity. Having went to the Model C schools, I started thinking white was better. I started internalizing the beliefs, because somehow there is the so-called hidden curriculum that we are learning through all these books and everything. We are being taught that certain things are better. The West is better. You aspire now to live in the West because you're busy reading the authors and whatever. So, but one thing that I wanted to say, Lerato, you'll let me know if I'm getting off the course. But I'm lucky that I've had enough, mentors, because I would have, just stopped. Because honestly, sometimes I'm only getting my real education knowledge now with PGCE, with Dr. Wacango. She's been an inclusive education lecturer. I didn't know what inclusive education was until I started speaking to her. But then obviously language is very important. If kids can also learn in their own language, then they wouldn't go through the things that I've went through. Wanting to be white at some stage and all of that, because I'm busy reading books written by white authors, which is absolutely fine. It also gave me, I feel like it also made me a little bit understand so-called white culture a little bit better, but it also was a bit tricky in terms of understanding self-identity and all of that. But now, operating in Soweto schools, doing these book clubs with your high school kids initially. Some schools, the English home language schools, there are some fantastic English home language schools which are producing excellent marks, and the kids are like fantastic, they're at top level. And then now, for some odd reason, for the first time I worked in a school, Lavella Secondary School. It's not far from where ma'am teaches. I've got one of my other mentors here who's been teaching for over 20 years. I encountered her last year. She was teaching grade 7s. And the funny thing with her is, ma'am, you teach first additional language, English. Yes. So their school, English is the first additional language. So then the first language is isiZulu. Yes. So for the first time now, I was in a school that wasn't English home language for learners. It was isiZulu. And then now you're trying to do your reading clubs or your spelling games and whatever. But then I can understand, wait, this school, most of the things are being done in isiZulu. And, you know, this is not an English home language school like I'm used to. But now the first additional language, ma'am, you know, she used to balance me out a lot because she'd be teaching in class and I'd be asking her, ma'am, how can I relate this reading club activity to what you're doing in the curriculum? She takes out a teaching plan and she quickly balances me out, and then we select the right game or approach. But then sometimes where I'd used to want to cry, Ma'am Rose will come in at any time eventually, but I know she also has to leave. But Ma'am said to me, she took me aside at some stage, she's like, Nelly, I've got grade 7s here who cannot read. And I'm like, how's that possible? They're in grade 7, why can't they read? She's like, fetal alcohol syndrome. Some kids, the parents are refusing to take them to special needs school because of stigma and whatever. And ma'am already, she's having to deal with huge classes and whatever, a huge teacher versus learner ratio and everything. She's got marking, she's got a lot, but now she has to also deal with these minute things of learners who can't read sitting in her class every day, and she's teaching English. What use is it? The child cannot read. But luckily, she's got over experience, which is why I'm grateful for her as a mentor. Luckily, with her experience and knowledge that she's gained, she knows how to deal with these learners. She tell me, okay, with this one, it's fine. You call them aside. You give this one a novel. You give this one a short story based on their reading level. And then, I don't know what the other one is, but we talk. But she knows exactly how to do for learners who can't read, how to do for learners who are excelling, giving them the novel, for learners who are average, giving them the comprehension or short story. She knows how to do this, but it's because she's been in the system and been able to do this for years. She knows what she's doing. But now I have friends, teachers who are my age, who are first additional language teachers at schools, who are absolutely out of their minds, not knowing how to deal with learners in matric who are struggling to read. My friend was teaching at high school last year, again in Soweto. It was his first year teaching English, and he couldn't understand, these kids are in matric, they're gonna judge me on these kids' marks. But I didn't create this problem, but I'm gonna be judged on the marks. And to the point where he, you know what, we fought a lot because he's like, no, we have to do the book club for the matrics, because the district is saying the matrics are struggling to read for meaning. So because I was like, nah, I don't do book club with matrics. I'd rather go anything from grade 11 downwards. That's me. I like those grades. But he's like, no, then you won't be able to do book club in the school because the matrics are the ones who need you. And we fought so much, you know. So those are the things that are so hectic that, I don't know, the lived experience is very difficult when we have first year teachers who are struggling at matric level to deal with learners who are not at the right level. Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, I went to the type of school you're referring to, you know, township school myself, and I know how demotivated our teachers were. Another time I thought, these teachers don't love us, right? But obviously we're whole, and you realize that, it's hard to be motivated in that kind of environment with, you know, the kind of support that you have there, the resources that you have. You didn't have a lab, the library, the building is there, but it's virtually empty. There's no one looking after it, you know. So yeah, but then how? So with that background in mind, that, you know, receiving the kind of education that won't necessarily, you know, enabled you to go into a community as a teacher, you know, as a citizen scholar, you know, to make a difference, it can actually demotivate you, you know. So I suppose a lot of us might be demotivated, but also just living in South Africa, you know, it can be very demotivating, maybe to you. Or where do we find our resources, our inspiration, our hope to advance the kind of education for empowerment, you know, but to also help facilitate education for empowerment. I think it shouldn't be the end of this conversation. But before I close, we're about to close. Anyone on the floor who want to say something? Okay, yes.
Thank you. During the 80s, you know, in our township, there was this kind of school boycotts. But we in Mamelodi, we started a non-formal education program. And then so we used YMCA in Mamelodi East. Most of the schools, you know, the students had to come to the YMCA. And then it was during sometimes the school holidays or even weekends. And there were some of the teachers who came to help some of the students, while others they go for this kind of a monate mpolai and they couldn't. But there were some of the students who were dedicated to learn, and I'm not a teacher, I'm an artist at the time, and I had to go to some companies like ASGO, going to find, you know, some funds to come and help this kind of kids. And it was art, music, the jazz music, some like Peter here. And then so it was a kind of dedication for us during the trying times. But now here we are in democracy. But what went wrong about, you know, helping our kids who are just roaming the street, even who don't have that passion, you know, to go back to the class, because, you know, I don't know, there is a lot of confusion within our education system now. And I'm still saying that when I introduce myself, you know, even when I'm being interviewed, I say I'm a non-formal educated educator, because most of the things which I acquire about, you know, art, and it was non-formal because when I went to school, art was never promoted. But just because I tried to decorate some of the books of my friends, that's when art was there inside me. But non-formally, I could get myself being an artist, even writing poetry. You see, even, you know, things like that, designing. It was only non-formal, but I wonder today if only our education system have to consider that there are people within the communities. Never mind, I don't have a certificate of teaching, but I'm a non-formal educator. I can teach children even at my home. They dubbed it a heritage house because we had books, we teach. Even now, children are coming, we teach them. And then there is this kind of a, you know, indigenous knowledge, like storytelling, where we tell children, oh, Mama Hasha, you know, when the rains is coming, run away. You know, they know it. Like Mamantan, when it's going to be sunset, hey, Mamantan, go back to home, because Mamantan is going to, you know, to pull out your hair. Things like that, we know that built our youth. But today, alas, our education system failed us in our communities.
I think the idea of, you know, decolonizing our idea of knowledge, you know.
Yes.
There are a lot of problems that we encounter in communities that can be solved by, I suppose, community members, whether they're formally qualified or not, but they can help us solve those problems. Even in schools, the problems that you encounter, you know, so we can interact better with, you know, the community members, you know, whether they went through the formal education route or not, you know, how do you work with them? But I suppose it's a colonized education. I think, this one is not educated. How is it going to help me? Okay, anyone else?
Go here.
Now that you've raised the issue of learners with special needs, I also have a friend who teaches in the area, in that corridor, Bosmont, Westbury. So he says he encountered some learners whom he classifies as special need learners, but he can't approach their parents, because it's
Stigma.
yeah, not necessarily stigma. It's you can be sued, as he put it, to say to your parent, your child is a slow learner. So how do you, as a citizen scholar, how do you deal with such issues? And again, coming to schools in Soweto, people of my generation say if you are good in sports, you're an athlete, you're good in soccer, the teachers would tell you that you can't finish your grade 12. Who would win trophies for the school? So we are taking you to a lower grade. Or if you are good in your studies, they'll tell you that you are too young to go to grade 5. So you are going to repeat the current grade that you are doing. So you find out you have a problem where someone of the age of Nell, you are teaching someone in grade 12. He is of your age. So he doesn't see you as a teacher. So there is that sort of, even the language that he uses towards you, it's not the language that a learner should use towards a teacher. Didn't you encounter such issues in Soweto?
Okay, so I have to fall back on Dr. Wacango immediately for this one, the special needs diagnostic element, because it is true. For part of this year, I'm still part of it. There's a homework and inclusive remediation center. It's run by a teacher who also left the system in my area. I'm part of it. Sometimes I go there if I've got time. But with her as well, we do get learners. The learners come there because they need help with homework, yes, because it's a homework center. But inclusive remediation is also because they're struggling. So you will definitely get the learners who the school has said this learner needs to go to LSN or the special needs section. They're not supposed to be mainstream. We do get learners like that. And me and the other teacher who runs that center will talk, and then she'll tell me all of these things that, you know, there are a lot of challenges with diagnosing learners in terms of telling them that you have to go to special needs, just like you said with that teacher. But then there's another problem that we've noticed in Model C. This is very difficult for me to say, but it's the reality, and I'm glad I'm going to get help. With learners, black learners, young black learners in primary school who are going to these Model C schools, who have a predominantly white staff, they don't understand why a learner in grade 1 or 2 is not understanding English and whatever. So they're very quick, some of these white teachers, to just say, take this learner to LSN or to special needs. And yet it's a multilingualism problem. The learners that we sit with in the inclusive remediation center doing their homework, this learner understands phonics, they understand maths, but this child, they just never got read to in English at home and all of that. And I'm like, this child should not be going to LSA. This child, it's a multi language problem. It's just multilingualism. And so some kids are now being pushed, unfortunately, unknowingly, by some white teachers who think that this child is a special needs learner. But no, this child, it's just a multilingualism issue. This child understands. If I teach the child maths in isiZulu and whatever, they fly after, you know. So there's just quite a lot there. I don't know, ma'am, how to deal with the diagnostic element in terms of, how to diagnose. How do you, inclusive education, what do you do?
Okay. Oh, well, it's a complicated problem. There are so many aspects to it, in the sense that, one, our education, like you said, is so focused on marks, matric, and grades, and that teachers are like the teacher you mentioned is going to be assessed according to the marks of his or her grade performance in matric. So that pushes out a lot of people from the school system. So even parents whose children have special needs will deny that aspect of their children's learning difficulties because they want their child to become the next accountant and the next, all those careers that we keep pushing children towards. So there are very many issues that come into play for creating those, they are what we call exclusionary aspects. What Mom said here about informal educators, unfortunately, they're still not today, because of that. Still the sense of our school system is so competitive, and a non-formal educator may not be involved in a school because they're saying, how will you provide our learners with the kind of education? We want them to become accountants, go to Wits, we want them to go to medical schools. So those are some of the dynamics that are at play. It's complicated, but one question Lerato asked, how do you keep focused? And I think one of the things that people need to always remember is that think about a child, your own child, you as a child, and that would be your image of how do I get involved. When you think about just one child, if you think about just one child, that will keep you thinking that if I make a difference to this one child, I'll have made a difference.
Yes.
So that for me is what often keeps me going, even in whatever I do. I mean, the inclusive space, it's a very difficult space. All schools in South Africa are meant to be inclusive. Unfortunately, teachers often resist having learners that are with disabilities or with learning challenges in their classrooms, because they have a curriculum, they've got to finish it by a certain time. They've got to get marks in a certain way. So it's complicated. So in a sense, all I can say is that keep that one child you have in mind and focus on that child and see what difference can you make to that one child that you have access to.
And unfortunately, the state is failing us, ne? And it might fail us for a very long time. So it's a question of like taking matters into our own hands now, and we can't allow ourselves to fail because the state is failing us. So let's continue with this conversation. It shouldn't be the end of it. Thank you. So privately, let's continue to talk about it. And thanks, everyone. I think we are done. Sure.